I drop bombs on them, this is hip hop for justice.
People that we're supposed to trust
racism and miscarriage of justice.
Trayvon Martin, an unarmed black teenager. Sandra Bland.
Death has provoked weeks of demonstrations.
2 years old, died later in hospital.
1.
The December 2nd shooting of Mario Woods by 5 officers.
The 2014 death of Michael Brown. 32-year-old Philando Castile.
We must win in the name of justice. In the name of justice for Mario Woods. In the name of justice for all others who've been brutalized by police.
People who are ready and willing to fight for justice.
Hip-hop artists are our leaders today.
You're more than just a rapper. You are a teacher, you are an artist, and you are a leader.
Your voices, your words, your rhythms have attracted young people in all of the countries of the earth that allow your music and your lyrics to be played.
Peace. Welcome to the Hip Hop for Justice Radio podcast. I am Brother Miles alongside my partners and co-hosts, S1W James Baum of the legendary Public Enemy, and the Queen of Hip Hop for Justice, my sister Half Pint of the legendary Son of Berserk, featuring No Self-Control. Peace. How you doing?
Peace, Brother Miles. I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to this week and this conversation so we can put some more work in.
It's all about putting work in. Absolutely. I'm going to say this before we move into the segments. Last week, the Fear of a Black Planet setting the record straight. That particular show where we brought Student Minister Christopher Muhammad, the local representative, San Francisco representative of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. We had him back on. And as you know, and for those that don't know out in the listening audience and those that'll hear this later, he's no stranger, and he's not a guest. He's not what you would consider your average guest. He's actually one of, really, we would consider him a founder of Hip Hop for Justice, because it was his direct guidance. And really, after the phone call I made to Brother James, just trying to get someone in hip-hop activated in the campaign for justice for Mario Woods out here in San Francisco, outside of the local activity and the coalition. After Brother James and I spoke, it was Student Minister Christopher who we shot the idea by to have this conference call that we're having right now. That started off, as you know, as an invitation only type of situation, where we were really going after artists, whoever we could reach, whoever we could get in contact with. And of course, as you know, we focused particularly on the legendary artists, but it wasn't that we were excluding anyone. It was really just trying to get those who we could, put hands on, so to speak, and make them aware. Number one, if they didn't know what happened to Mario Woods, make them aware and then get them activated and on the platform, on the call, so that we could give them up-to-date information. Because in real time, as we were active as the coalition out here, and Student Minister Christopher Muhammad was the leading voice on the ground for the Justice for Mario Woods coalition. But in real time, being active out here on the ground, there was so much happening at that time. And I'm only bringing that up because when we had the Fear of a Black Planet setting the record straight show last week, the response, as we had the defending Farrakhan a few months back, the response was incredible. Again, we had a very large live listenership, and then of course people listening to the archive recording on Mixcloud and then on SoundCloud. So it's been good, and people have asked for the links, and even today people are asking for the links and they want to spread it, and so we're continuing that campaign. And I'm only saying this, because this is really what the platform is about. It's about activation. It's about becoming proactive in our communities, taking responsibility to build our communities up, to police and patrol our communities and protect them, and to really make them decent and safe places for us to live, to raise babies, to see grandchildren grow and prosper and build on the legacy of this generation. And we can kind of consider ourselves lightweight pioneers now to the new generation. You know what I mean? So just wanted to say that as we're awaiting Big Brother James. There's a delay with James Bomb getting on the line. So we'll look into that. But why don't you have Pine, if you don't mind, just give us some thoughts on what you think, how you think that went last week. And then we're going to jump into your segment, and God willing, by that time, we'll have Brother James on. But give us some thoughts on last week. How do you think last week went? And if you got any feedback from anyone regarding it.
As far as last week, as any other week when we start this show, we put it out, the reception is very warm, it's very welcoming, and I think the people want more. As always, it's informative, and when Brother Minister Christopher comes on, he's always dropping jewels, and it's imperative that we have someone like him at the forefront of our message, because we are, I'm a layman and such, most of the teachers are Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Farrakhan, but also I'm a layman in what's taking place over in California directly. So, I was privileged to be able to understand and hear some of that information about Mario Woods and be put onto the movement, so that this way that I can bring it this way and introduce my students to it, because what we've started doing is actually expanding our civic duty, not just confining it into the community, but out the community abroad. So they know that the world outside that town that they live in is much bigger, and that there are needs and that need to be addressed, not just in our community, but the community at large. So whenever I hear messages of hope and determination and moving forward and getting guidelines on what we need to do, it gets me into that motion to where that's what I start to do, hitting the road running when I start on Monday morning with my students. So it's always informative, and like I said, the feedback is always great. They want more, and that's good, because that means that we are mounting a caravan of people who are tired of the system, that want to change the system, whether it's from within or divesting to create our own. Either way, they're set up, and they want solutions, and they're willing to now start listening and do what's necessary.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. It looks like we've been joined by Big Brother James Bomb. Big Brother, peace.
Peace.
But we'll start with Half Pint, give you an opportunity and work out your background situation, and we'll bring you on right after that. So Half Pint, let's get started. We'll start with our segments. If everybody give Half Pint your attention, and she gives us a peace of mind.
Peace of mind. Peace, my brothers and sisters. Tonight's reading and homework is Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver. In his chapter, Primeval Mitosis, he explains how the unitary society will project its unitary sexual image. Each class projects a sexual image coinciding with its class function in society. The source of the fragmentation of the self in class society lies in the alienation between the function of the man's mind and the function of his body. Man as a thinker performs an administrative function in society. Man as a doer performs a brute power function. These two basic functions are symbolized when they are embodied in the living men functioning in society as the omnipotent administrator and the supermasculine menial. Since all men are created equal, when the self is fragmented by the operation of the laws and forces of class society, men in the elite classes usurp the controlling and administrative function of the society as a whole. They usurp the administrative component in the nature and biology of the men in the classes below them. Administrative power is concentrated at the apex of society, in the godhead of the society. Administrative power beneath the apex is delegated. Those in classes to which no administrative power has been delegated have the administrative component in their personality suppressed, alienated, and denied expression. Those who have usurped the administrative functions, we shall call them the omnipotent administrators. Struggling among themselves for higher positions in administrative hierarchy, they repudiate the component of brute power in themselves, claim no kinship with the, and project it onto the men in the classes below them. Peace, my brothers and sisters.
Half Pint, thank you so much for that. Powerful words. Thank you so much for that segment. We're going to move quickly to Big Brother James Bomb, S1W of the legendary Public Enemy, for his segment, Louder Than a Bomb.
Peace, family. This night, we're going to talk about the crucifixion of black leadership. And crucifixion, the term crucifixion is something used by the Romans and the Greeks and the Macedonians to break slaves and to humiliate leaders of revolts or rebel leaders in order to break them and humiliate them in the streets. So they use this crucifixion where they hang you on a cross, strip you down, and show your shame in the streets and the public. So it's sort of like how electronically they did Michael Jackson in terms of him being him as a celebrity and a powerful voice in the world. He's a child. He loves children, but they follow you and put cameras on you, and this goes for every black leader. They sift you, so to speak, Brother Miles. Minister Farrakhan used that term, sifting. What that means is that there's a camera. They spent $42 million on our brother, Marion Barry. May Allah be pleased with him. But there's a man in this city that did everything in this city for black people. And most of your black millionaires and billionaires that came in this area, he had something to do with him. He was the type of man that if a city contract went somewhere, if it went to black people. It didn't just go to the white, but he made it his business that black people would get contracts in Washington D.C. Any contract, but the crucifixion of black leadership in America, we want to just switch these places. One of the worst crucifixions in the history of entertainment was Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson was crucified because of his strong stand as a man, as an actor, and an athlete. He spoke. So now in entertainment, they don't want to see strong men like that. And an athlete, Muhammad Ali was the strongest voice, him and Jim Brown and Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. These men made it worthy for black athletes today to stand up, but they ain't standing up like Colin Kaepernick did. Colin Kaepernick didn't speak words; his actions did it. So the crucifixion of him, where he can't work no more, cut him off completely from even making a living. But he can't cut off the blessing once you stand up as a man or a woman for your own people. So crucifying our leadership, like Tamika Mallory, as a strong woman who spoke to the women's movement and said to the white counterparts that they wasn't going to take a back seat to them, or we just supposed to be the help. This is her words, she said. We just supposed to be the help, but we're not the help, because our movement in this country has made this country successful and off the backs of slaves. So whatever we do today, we can't participate in the madness that goes on against our leadership, because most of the time we participate in the onslaught of our own people. And Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, all of those who went before this new leadership. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is under attack as we speak, because they don't want to see a strong black leader talk to us and lead us. But in 2019, and I'm saying this because we're going to do this over a period of time, we're going to do this over several segments, that we cannot continue to give our leaders to this white machine to destroy our leaders because we participate in it. We have a lesson that says, can you be a part of a conspiracy and not knowing? But in 2019, we have all of the histories from Martin to Malcolm to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, to all of those that whatever the white media has said about them, we have participated in it. Oh, I know that nigga wasn't no good. We can't do that today. We can't continue to do that because there's a God on scene today and he's looking at this here. Today, black people must support our leadership no matter what the media says about them. We find out on our own. Don't let them dictate to us what it is. So more next issue. Peace.
Brother James, thank you so much for that. Very profound words and principles and lessons and everything that you said. Thank you so much for that segment. We're going to go right into welcoming our illustrious guest, family member for the evening. This is actually an introduction to a degree, even for myself. I was blessed to be introduced to our sister, Andrea Les Musique Temmeli, a few days ago. Brother James was speaking to me last week, or maybe the week before, and letting me know, that we need to have this conference call with this sister Andrea. And, so he shared with me some words, and the timing didn't work. But last week, just a few days ago, he hit me up again, and I'm looking at my watch, and I'm like, man, I don't have the time. I gotta get to an appointment, and he was running, and he kind of insisted and said a few things, and we ended up having this meeting, this conference call between the three of us, and it went a lot longer than any of us anticipated, and we were all kind of running to get somewhere, and each one of us said, okay, I gotta run, and the conversation continued, and it was filled with so much spirit and so much electricity, and I was really introduced to who I believe, number one, a powerhouse black woman, a very strong sister, on many levels, a very professional minded woman, and someone filled with the spirit that's in total harmony with what the Hip Hop for Justice platform is all about. Our sister Andrea, just to give you all a little brief background, and we're going to get into it with her in just a second, but she's a former radio personality at Foxy 105 WFXE, former business liaison for the group Silk, business liaison for MC Delight, former Atlanta market manager and GM for WWE and WAEC at Beasley Media Group, and she is presently the general manager for Rapstation. And we're going to get into her background. We're going to get into her professional background on many levels. And we just want to introduce to you all somebody who's going to show and prove to be a wonderful addition to the cultural revolution, and will play a very significant role in the cultural revolution. Hip Hop for Justice Radio Podcast welcomes our sister Andrea Les Musique Temmeli. Peace, my sister. Welcome. Did I say
wow. You not only said it right, you said a mouthful. That is quite a lot of accolades. I'm very humbled. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Well, we're humbled to have you, and it's our pleasure and our honor to have you with us. And let's start. Like I said, we're going to try to stay the last few weeks and have Pine and Brother James can bear witness. And I know you got the links to the archives, and you'll bear witness. They're getting a little longer than the hour and 15-minute prescribed time, and that's cool because we kind of roll.
That's some good listening, though. I enjoyed so far everything I've listened to. I can't stop. I'm hooked.
Man, well, listen, that means we're on good footing, and people that are listening now and that'll hear this later, hear the recording later, we're gonna get to why that's a very good thing that we just heard from our sister. But let's go back real quick. Let's do a flashback kind of thing and go into your childhood, a little bit of your younger years, your young life, and tell us a little bit about that. And where are you from? Where did you grow up? And tell us a little bit about your early childhood life.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I grew up in South Ozone Park, Queens. Jamaica, Queens, a lot of people will know of South Ozone Park. It's all kind of in the same area. And in the 70s, I was one of 32 African-American children that were tested when they were around the age of 4 for having a genius IQ. I didn't tell y'all this part. And I was put into a program called the Astor program. It was a trial program to see if you could take children from any economic background and give them pre-collegiate work from the time that they were in kindergarten and see what would happen. Wow. So they had several classes. They still have the Astor program to this day, but it's much more watered down than it was when we were in the classes in the 70s. They had everything from astrophysicists come in to psychologists to mathematicians that taught at major Ivy League schools. So I would go from, and it was, like I said, it wasn't just me, it was other children in the area. And we went to PS 124 and we stayed together until the 8th grade, and then we all went into our different directions. 9th grade, I went to Friends Academy in Locust Valley, New York, which was the school of the elite. I went to the school with the Fortunoff family, the Ronzoni family, the Dario String. I even went to school, and in my class was Duncan Helix, whose father created the helix, the double helix, which is the finding of the chromosome strands for our DNA. College, I went to United States Merchant Marine Academy, 2 congressional nominations from there. I left there because of the misogynistic way that the military was back then, and also the amount of child prostitution that I saw at the ports when I went overseas during the Persian Gulf.
Wow.
And I finished up my degree in computer science and programming at Columbus College, which is now Columbus University. And I'm actually going back to school so I can get ultimately my JD because I want to get my law degree. So I went to school. I was from the South Side. I got to see FUBU when they just was selling hats on the corner. Yeah. And I was, MC Delight actually, and Daddy-O became my babysitters one summer accidentally. It's a long story. I'll tell you about it later. And so I grew up in the world of hip hop. And this is back when self-destruction was a big deal. And when people say, when did you first fall in love with hip hop? I first fell in love with hip hop, I don't know, somewhere between the day I was born and when Scott LaRock got shot. So it was, so for me, hip hop has always been a part of my culture and who I am. I met Chuck when I was in 10th grade, and we've been friends, and our friendship has grown over the years, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be a part of his vision and his dreams. So from the childhood part, that's what that's about. Now, I don't know, you want me to talk about the other part, the family?
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. I'm glad you ran over it and gave us such a detailed backdrop in just a few minutes, because you just hit the bullet point, the key points, and that you touched on, of course, being connected with Chuck. I want to ask you, how did you get involved in the actual music business, coming from the, the education that you were experiencing, and of course everything that you just mentioned with that particular program at a very, very early age. What made you, how did you end up in the music business? And then let's get into some of your background, and because you also come from the artist side, right?
Yes.
So let's get into,
that's how it all started.
Let's start right there then.
Well, much to my mother's chagrin, as much as I had this big, huge brain, I also loved poetry and I loved to sing. And I was pretty good at it. And I've had this voice, which people are like, oh, you should be in radio. But I've had this voice since I was 10 years old. So I could actually imitate the operators and go, the number you have reached, 718, things like that, even when I was a kid. So, I always had a thing for the arts. And I was fortunate enough to have a music teacher that saw my talent and my ability and my heart for it. And her name was Mrs. Freeman. And Miss Freeman, ironically, also changed schools. So at the same time I left the elementary school and went to JHS 202, she also got a job there. So I was able to be under her tutelage for like 3 or 4 years. I eventually was in a little group that got signed to GNR Records. The GNR stood for GNR. It was Gary. N was for Neville, and I can't remember what the R, what his name was. I was so young, but it was Aaron Neville. That was actually one of the members or partners in this little record label. And I was in a little group. It was me and about 3 or 4 little girls. We all kind of looked alike, and my voice was different. And they wanted to do a solo project with me, and Mom was, she was willing to let me do that, but, the pictures they wanted to take of me were a little bit more mature than what my mother wanted, and I was 13 at the time. So I kind of left from doing that. She kind of really kept me away from entertainment as much as she tried anyway. So I was supposed to go to performing arts, high school performing arts, the school everybody knows is the school on the movie Fame. But my mom wouldn't let me go there, and even though I got accepted for vocals. And eventually, as time went on, after the military, I just got back into it. I went to a symposium where the vice president of Capitol Records, who was a black woman at the time, she was the speaker. And me and this one other guy kept asking all the right questions in this classroom. And so when we went on break, come to find out he was a producer on Bad Boy. Now, I went there thinking I was going to get signed. I just knew it. You know what I'm saying? I'm in my 20s. I'm young. I got this fabulous figure and all this stuff. And we were in the Marriott Hotel. And so we went to the lobby. There was a pianist at a grand piano, doing his thing. It was downtown Manhattan. So I got on top of the piano, stretched out, straight blues style, and sang Billie Holiday. And next thing you know, I became, his name was Dean DeBeetham. He's now Zion DeBeetham. Ironically, he's actually he works for Lionsgate, and he does a lot of things in film now. And he still does music and everything. He also worked with Chuck Thompson. And I got on his team, and, which ultimately is a part of Chuck Thompson's team on Bad Boy. And, that's really where I started to really learn a lot about the ins and outs of the industry. And unfortunately for me, there was another light-skinned girl with red hair, on Bad Boy. And, and shout out to Faith. So she went in one direction. And, I wound up doing background vocals and studio work on the Total Project and some other stuff like that. And it was a great experience, and that's how I really got into it. So, I'm kind of proof positive that there are people out there that can think with both sides of their brain. A lot of us, people think that artists are just, these creatives, which we are. But a lot of times we also have that other side, the analytical side as well. So that's how I got into it.
But now, if you could share with us some of the artists that you've worked with, whether it be recording or on the other side of the business. Share with us some of that experience.
Oh, wow. One of my first major artists working with was KRS-One. Hey, Chris. So Chris Parker's wife at the time was Simone Parker, and she was doing an album for Columbia Records. So I got to do some background work for her. I worked with a group called Black Moon Rising. I got the pleasure of doing some stuff with Wu-Tang back in the day, and actually it's really cool because some of the Wu-Tang crew is coming on Rapstation now, and so I'm really excited about that because it's a pleasure to always support such a phenomenal group and movement within themselves. Of course, Silk, as you mentioned earlier, Stetson Sonic. Gosh, I'm trying to think of just off the top of my head. Soul, what's his name? Music Soul Child. Bobby Valentino. I did contract work for him. I don't know. It's just a bunch of people.
Needless to say, you're well-rounded and well familiar with the multiple angles and dimensions of the music business.
Yes.
And that's really something that's rare. As you know, most of the time we as a people, particularly our artists, they don't really get familiar with the business side until they've undergone some very traumatic experiences.
This is true.
Economic as well as other traumatizing experiences. And unfortunately, they get surrounded by the wrong people who say things to make you think that they have your best interest at heart and in mind, when in fact you're seen as a cash cow. You're only as good to them as the hits you make and the money that results comes in as a result of those hits and bookings, etc. So unfortunately, so many of us learn the lesson on the business side so very late. But I want to bring in Half Pint and Brother James to chime in with any questions that they may have as we're moving the conversation forward, because the big part of the conversation is going to be the present time situation as general manager of Rapstation, what all that means, what Rapstation is. We want to give people a good understanding of that, and then we want to talk about something else very special that's in the works with Rapstation. So let's start with Half Pint. Let me bring Half Pint in, and then we'll go to Brother James. Half Pint.
What did y'all say? Y'all was bringing the John Pint Show back on Rapstation.com? No, I'm just joking.
That's all right.
Well, we ready when y'all ready. But, peace, sister, how are you? I just have a question about, since you've been in, a part of hip-hop business, partaking in that, what have you seen that the elevation of women in hip-hop and their roles, as the evolution has gone? What do you see it now?
That's a powerful question right there. I know my girl Krista, who's probably, if she's listening or she's going to catch it in the archive, she actually is the head and curator of She Movement Radio, which is one of Rapstation's stations that's dedicated to nothing but.
Very familiar with that.
Yeah, so Krista Monique, got a shout. Question like that, I got to shout my girl out because, it's all about females and hip hop for that. To answer that question, we haven't gone far enough. I think that one of the problems that there's always been is that there is a misogynistic way of hip hop taking on our sisters. And this generation that we have now has lost their ever-loving mind in terms of how they talk about, they treat, and they respect our queen. So to answer that question, the best way to say is that what I've seen is that women have had to try and figure out not only how to assimilate into a primarily male-dominated industry and be able to compete in the same realm. We, of course, had to learn all the ropes, and as you know, the same way black people had to always do it a little bit better than their other, counterparts racially in order to succeed. It's the same thing in hip-hop. Women have had to be better than even some of their male counterparts just to even have the opportunity. On the flip side of that, the other thing that I've seen is that we as women in hip-hop, we, over the years, have not always worked together very well, being 100. And I think that because of that, there was a period during the 80s in particular and the 90s that we missed out on because we had so many awesome big names that were coming out of females in rap. But because we didn't really understand how to bring all that power together and execute a plan, I think that somewhere between our old generation and this new generation of females, there's a gap and there's a loss, not only of respect, but also in terms of being able to utilize these platforms and have the economic power and change, and most importantly, the community power that we really hold in our hands as women in hip-hop. So I think that our journey has been both awesome and self-destructive at the same time, being 100. And what I hope to see in this next phase of hip-hop is that now that women we're finally at a place where we're being accepted. I'm the general manager of Rapstation. This is the global, network for hip-hop itself. And a female is now in charge of that, So I think that, Chuck doing that was a statement within itself on what's happening in the future and to recognize the power that we as females bring. So I think that while we have made some mistakes in our journey in hip-hop, I think we've learned from it. And I think it's important now that the segment has a schism between women that are understanding of what the cultural movement and responsibility that they have in the community is on one side. You also have these other women on the other side that are willing to literally become the poster children of everything that we fought against. So the line has been drawn. And the question now becomes in hip-hop, which side are you going to be on? Are you going to take responsibility for your words and your actions in hip-hop? Or are you going to go for the money and the very short-lived career that you can have as being that poster child for the misogyny and the objectivity that we had to deal with in the past?
Right.
That's my answer on that.
Thank you, sister. That's powerful and insightful. Thank you very much. I appreciate
it. Beautiful. That's it. Listen, Brother, I don't even have nothing. I don't have nothing to say on that, Brother James. Let's bring Brother James in to see what kind of question he wants to fire at.
Okay. I do have a question, and I like how you brought everything, because when I was going to ask you, what do you mean the self-destruction? But I don't want to go there. I like how you answered it. But how do you see the business model today moving forward for the music business, and what some of the things you're doing creatively for Rapstation right now?
Thank you for that question, and Brother James, I appreciate you on that. In terms of the business of music, we're faced with some interesting conundrums right now. We've got questions that almost can't be answered. Like, for example, it used to be a time when you got signed. You got sign-on bonuses. You spent them the wrong way. Let's be real, and then get yourself in all kinds of trouble. But you still made some money in the process. And then you got on the road. You made some more. Rest is history. You got your royalties. Rest is history. Now you can have, say literally 1 million downloads and spins on Spotify your royalty check might be $2,000 soaking wet. Well, in today's age, depending on your lifestyle and depending on the number of people in your family that you've taken care of, $2,000 might cover you 1 month. So our industry has changed because the truth is that nobody really knows how they're making money. Nobody does. And it's like they think they do, but they don't. And because we have the internet now, and we have the ability to get distribution deals a little bit easier, which is ironic because a lot of people still don't know how to get them. But the ability to get distributed on the different platforms like Spotify and iTunes and so forth and so on are relatively easy to get. So the question then becomes, well, how do you make money in this business? So a lot of this has to come from the ability to know how to market yourself, the ability to be able to have some form of merchandise and branding when you do your public performance. And to honestly, you got to really go get out there and grind on your own because the machine, quote unquote, which is what is called in the industry when the major companies put certain money and backing behind you, is very, very limited. That's a very small set of people and window that are going to really get that level of opportunity. Most of us in the industry, even though we may have all this prowess, this respect, and this and that and the other, we are still not on the same economic level as, say, someone like Beyonce. Just, calling out a name. Just, I'm using that as a prime example. Or a Jay-Z or what have you. But if you notice, if you take some of these major people and look at them as a model, you'll see that one of the biggest ways that they become the conglomerates that they are is from diversity. This is why for the average artist that's listening, if you don't know what a 360 deal is, you need to research it. I don't have the time to go into that, but at the end of the day, understand that you are, as an artist, not only an individual, you are a commodity, an asset. And that means that you have to have the understanding that that asset belongs to you first and foremost. And from that asset, you have to then figure out who is going to get a cut of the value of that asset and what are they going to do for you to make it worth you giving them a part of the asset known as your career. So the economic changes in the industry and the openness of the internet has created an environment where it's anybody's opportunity. Now, what Rapstation is doing for this new world of rap and music in general is that for every artist that is out there that is on that level, a Drake, an Akon, a Beyonce, a Jay-Z, whatever, a Cardi B now, At the same time, though, there's about 200 other artists across the globe that could probably sing or rap any one of them under the water, but we don't know who they are. And the worst part is that we might never know who they are because they don't have the outlet and they don't have the knowledge and the ability to be heard. So Rapstation as a network is providing not only a place to be heard, but a service to the independent artists to allow them to have their opportunity to be in what we call the flotation of an actual radio network that is heard by millions all over the world. From there, you can now utilize this platform that you have to get other things going. I always tell people that radio is merely a tool in the utility belt of marketing. It is not the end-all, be-all, but it is a sledgehammer, okay? And if you know how to swing it the right way in relationship to the other nails and things you got going on in your project, if you'll, pardon the imagery, then you'll eventually know how to make sure that you can not only build something that's sturdy, but you'll also be able to reap the benefits of the exposure that Rapstation provides. So we provide a service to the artist to give that person that lives in, Podunk, Mississippi, that has hardly any studios but spent all their money getting equipment, because now you can do that and get some good equipment, and they hooked it up and they turned their closet into a booth. And they spit out this awesome album, and they put all this money into it. And then the truth is that once they finish with it, who's going to hear it besides their friends? And so we want to give them an opportunity to be able to say, hey, I'm here, I'm on this. And then we have flotation charts. And these charts are also listed not only on our sites and on our app, but Chuck D himself on his program, And You Don't Stop, which is on Pacifica terrestrial stations across the country, will then give you that shout out and that prop about being on there if you make the chart. So there's an actual opportunity for an icon to not only say your name, but to give you the respect that you deserve because the curators of the different stations recognized you and picked you in that flotation chart. So there's opportunities that you can't necessarily get on Billboard or whatever if you don't know how to manipulate that system or even get into it. So that's some of what, and that's, we're doing a lot more than that, but just in a nutshell, that's a lot of what Rapstation is about from the artist standpoint, to answer that question.
I got one, and I appreciate that because you said a mouthful there. Now, how important Napster was to this way of doing music now? How important was Napster to this?
Oh, wow. Napster, of course, is at this stage in the game obviously antiquated, But there is no question that Napster was, I think they attempted to be the forerunner for what we're doing now. What Napster didn't anticipate was how open the gates were going to be of the internet. They didn't anticipate that. If they had understood the flexibility and the number of sheer choices that we would eventually have, both in terms of where we can post and put music, but also where we can listen to it, I think that they would have probably been more of a force to be reckoned with where we are now. But because they didn't anticipate that, I don't think anybody did, really. We now have a situation where a Napster couldn't work because it was based on algorithms that couldn't hold all of the different potential outlets that are creating those streams. Now, there are companies that are coming out now. Matter of fact, a friend of mine is a partner in a pretty major company that does both bookings and promotion. I can't say their name because certain deals aren't done, but they're working with a company. There are two right now that are creating the ability to take a name like James Bond, and they can put it into their system and literally track who's talking about James Bond, how many times James Bond is mentioned everywhere on every portion of the internet. Because the internet that we have in the United States, for example, is completely different than the one they have in China. And their technology has the ability of being able to track all of it. And there are companies that are using these algorithms and these situations to figure out where to put their money and what artists to get behind in terms of being able to sponsor their stuff. So to answer your question about Napster, I think Napster was a good example of what could have been a great idea and was for a season, but they didn't anticipate how wide our choices would be and how free a lot of our choices are. And I think that's what made them become antiquated. And I think that what we're doing at Rapstation is ironically taking a little bit of the old school where curators and actual people in the industry that are working these stations have a say in who gets the exposure. So it's no longer based on algorithms. And I think that's where, and if it's not based on algorithms, then it can't be manipulated. And that's one of the things that, that I take pride in, that Chuck taught me, is that, he was saying I can't say it the way he says it, but, we're going to bump the algorithm, because let's go back to the old school where it's all about heart and it's all about love and it's all about the quality of the music based on what you hear and not based on who has the biggest following on Instagram. Because I've seen some people have 2 million people following them. I don't know who they are. And I'm sitting there, how did you get 2 million people. But if you put that into an algorithm, that means that their stuff will get listened to before this other artist over here that really is dope. So that needs to change.
Wow. That's good. Good info. Good info. Because one of the reasons why I asked you that question is because I know Chuck, the guy who owns Napster, Chuck, was very key with dealing with the Napster situation and the way we live in the digital world now. Napster was an ideal format, but like you said, it didn't expand the idea further enough, and with the internet and whatnot. So you don't have Napster anymore, but the idea was great.
Mm-hmm. It was beyond great. You know what I'm saying? But you got to keep in mind though, the people like I want to say his name is Sean. The person that actually kind of started Napster, he also was the first president of Facebook. So even though the concept of Napster didn't really take off, the people behind Napster had the sense enough to go into other projects with these next generation that, did have some anticipation. That's why they went to Facebook, So just keep that in mind. He was in Facebook, he owned stuff in Spotify, so he all right. he did quite okay, even though Napster had its moment, Yeah,
we had a chance to meet him in the beginning when he first started out. So that's kind of talked with him. But this is the format in the digital world that we live in. I was checked Soulja Boy, and what he was talking about, he had 2 million people to stream his stuff, and he made this amount of money. And I was like, wow, this dude, but he knows how to work it, marketing. He was on the Breakfast Club a few days ago, and he talked about it, how he did it. So, so it's working if you understand it and know it.
It is, but you also have to remember that Soulja Boy had a machine behind him, so the reason why he was able to do what he did is because he already had that kick-started momentum of national press and advertisement, which your average local artist is not going to have. So it's not like he was able to do that when I first interviewed him when he was like 15. You know what I'm saying? It's like that happened later on. Once he got to certain levels, and of course those algorithms worked really well. Plus he had stuff on TV going. Remember, it was on those reality shows. So there's a lot more. He was telling the truth all day, but you have to first look at, the starting point of how he was able to get all of that. Because let's just use straight mathematics here. Let's say hypothetically. Matter of fact, it's like, what is the age of the internet, isn't it? Okay, so I'm gonna go to Instagram really quick. Indulge me for 10 seconds, and we're gonna put in Soulja Boy. Okay, so Soulja Boy has 5.2 million followers on Instagram alone right now. Okay, so let's just pretend for 5 seconds that he gets a dime, for every time one of his songs is streamed or used or whatever. Okay, a dime of just the people on Instagram alone, a dime would mean that this man is getting $500,000 literally every time something is being streamed, if all of those particular followers actually did something with Soulja Boy. Now, another way to look at it is that you also, once you have a machine behind you, let's say like Soulja Boy probably doesn't have the machine behind him anymore, right? We can all agree on that. But he still has the name, he's got that following. Well, now, that music, if it's put into, games like Grand Theft Auto, or whatever. Like, for example, Stetsasonic, one of their songs was in Grand Theft Auto about, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Things like that. So when these kids are playing these games and they turn on the dial, of that, that money is going to translate into royalties every time that unit is sold, that game. So, yes, he's right. There are ways to make a lot of money with the downloads, but in all honesty, like I said before, that goes back into that 360 thing. It's honestly not just about the airing of the music on a radio or on iTunes. It's deeper than that. It's where you're going to have your music placed. What commercial is going to take a couple of bars from your song, or what movie is going to play on the outro. These are the ways that these royalties start to add up, because once it's in that movie, now every time that movie streams on Netflix, it goes on DVD, it's on Blu-ray, it's over here, it's over there. You're getting a little piece of change. And a dime or a quarter or a nickel can add up when you times that by millions. You feel me? So that's where it really comes from, So there was a couple things he left out, being honest.
I'm glad I'm on your side so you can tell me that.
Now, this is really powerful information, and people are hearing this from somebody who's not theorizing. You're not guessing about it. You're somebody who's been actively involved. If it's safe for me to say, 30 plus years in this business. So you have a good handle on what you're talking about.
Made me sound old.
We're the same age, so we're
yeah,
I'm never that. But so now that you kind of went into the rap station side, this is where I wanted to kind of finish off and really grand slam it, because you got the bases loaded now. So now let's talk about this new rap station, if you will, because rap station went through some reconfiguration, some revamping, some restructuring. Obviously, you're better qualified than I am to speak on that. So why don't you give us just a little, we're not going to go into details, but let's just talk about, the difference between what was Rap Station and where we are now, and what is this Rap Station 365 that people are seeing and hearing about. Let's get into an update on what Rap Station is, where it's come from, and where it is now, and what we can look forward to. And there's something about what we're doing tonight and these podcasts that we have now been releasing to the public that Rap Station has shown some interest in, and we want to end on that note. So just give us a little bit of where we were with Rap Station and where we are and what we're looking forward to. And then, of course, the Hip Hop for Justice radio podcast, home on Rap Station.
Gotcha. Well, the Rap Station that Chuck founded before was more an upload-download process between producers and rappers to be able to find each other. That's how it started, really, where they would be able to download a tight beat, rap on it, upload it, and hopefully from there be able to create some awesome music. From there, it turned into another element where they now had the ability to have entire shows be, for lack of a better word, podcasted directly on a server. And, then with the changing times, Rap Station was taken offline. So, it just kind of went away for a while. Now that it's back, Chuck has, we call the primary station Rap Station 365 because it's 365 days of pure, unapologetic hip-hop and hip-hop culture. It also signifies a new era, and it signifies a new entire Rap Station movement. It's Rap Station 365 now. And the reason for that is because now we're into more of a professional radio environment. And we still have all the other elements that we had before. And as we continue to grow and move forward in this, other elements of visibility, video, things for producers and stuff like that, that's all going to come into play. So we now have 10 channels Our channels have it. So Rapstation 365 is a primary that kind of introduces you to all the other possibilities of where you want to go. You want to listen to females and hip hop only? All right, cool. So you might listen this particular hour to the She Movement radio show. And then if you want more of that, you can go to the She Movement radio station and listen to nothing but females and hip hop.
Wow.
You want to see what's going on? You want to hear DMX's new 2019 album or whatever else is going on? Then go to Hip Hop Gods and check that out. And now you get all the rap greats. People have been in the industry for 20 years or more. And it's not just about hearing the classics, but what are they doing right now today? Yeah. And you can hear that. Y'all might not know that Daddy-O has an album out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But you're going to get to hear that on Hip Hop Gods. You might not have heard the album that Chuck just released as Mr. Chuck. And it's dope. You know what I'm saying? But you'll get to hear that and other people like that. So you can have that. You want to find out what's going on for like Hip Hop for Justice? Oh, did I say that? Or any one of the actual shows?
Hold on. What did you just say?
Did I just say that? Can I say that?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so if you want to hear something like Hip Hop for Justice, an awesome show that's going to talk about the different situations we got going on in the community and in the African American culture and also in the Pan-Africanism culture that's happening all across the world, well, then you might want to check out Wakanda Radio. So you might hear Hip Hop for Justice and say, oh, that was an awesome hour. Let me go ahead and listen to an entire station of open-mindedness and positivity and perpetuating melanated people forward. You'll go to Wakanda and hear hip-hop and how it relates to justice, culture, economics, education, and everything else happening across the globe, because we are everywhere and in everything. That's why we're always appropriated. Oh my God, did I say that? So with all that being said, we have all these different channels that'll talk about different aspects of the hip-hop culture, and we have 10 total. We have different charts, flotation charts for the music, and we also have our website and our app to cover different areas such as news and journalism. So it is all about hip-hop. It is just what it says. It is a rap station. 365 days of it in every area you can think of. So there you have it.
That's like Disney World, hip-hop world. Shoot.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah. So, to make sure, I hope everybody definitely downloads the app. Because that's, very important. It's like if the more people download the app and have it where they can have, their hip hop culture on demand, the better, and a lot of us are doing this. We're all doing this out of heart, out of love for hip hop. We really are. So it's really cool because when it's about heart and it's about the love of hip hop, it takes away the question of where's the motivation? Why are they doing this? We're doing it because we believe in you. We believe in Hip Hop for Justice. We believe in these independent artists. We believe in the culture, and we believe in the art, and the mentality that goes with it. So that's what we do.
Beautiful. I got to say this real quick, family. While you all were talking, while you were finishing what you were saying, literally, my whole thing, my app, everything just shut down. And I had to literally come back on. And I'm just seeing James text me, "Are you still on?" And I'm saying that because what you're saying and the power and the power potential in seeing Rapstation reach its full potential, knowing the like-minded individuals that are a part of it, that are at its core nucleus, knowing, you remember you talked about earlier being able to manipulate charts and, who's doing this and who's on top. And remember the conversation we had a couple days ago, you talked about Billboard, specifically, right? But when you're talking about doing what you're doing, what Chuck's vision is, what your vision is, what our vision is collectively, because now you're talking about a unified collective effort, which is not just a Chuck D responsibility. He's carrying the vision along with 50 million other things that he's involved in and trying to spearhead, or now there's a collective, which Hip Hop for Justice is an artistic collective whose purpose is to address matters of injustice and activate artists to get involved. You know what I mean? In being active again. James and I earlier were talking about, Brother James and I were talking about earlier, Harry Belafonte and the majesty of that man, the magnitude of that man, the fact that we still have him with us. And you don't know how much longer you'll have that great and powerful mind among us. So we need to tap in to him, because here's a man who, other than Harry Belafonte, other than Armins Louis Farrakhan, who came into the Nation of Islam as a musician, a very popular and who's still a magnificent musician, but he came into the nation as a musician, and I believe it's attributed to Malcolm, Minister Malcolm X, who mentioned, I believe Brother Akbar, Brother James, say this. The international representative of the Nation of Islam, Minister Abdul Akbar Muhammad, he said that the word from Malcolm was that the very popular young musician from Boston is in the audience, and if we can get him, he would be a great helper to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and to the cause of the resurrection and redemption of our people, because artists have the attention of their contemporaries. They're the stars, right? And we were talking about, other than Harry Belafonte, you would have to go to Paul Robeson to get that level of, artist or athlete and activism. You know what I mean? And so when we say Hip Hop for Justice is where art meets activism, that's our platform, and that's what we want to do. We want to reignite that activism, particularly in hip hop. And I went into all of that because these type of powerful conversations, these type of dialogues produce fear in our enemies. Why did my computer literally just went black? And then the arrow popped up. And I had to pull the thing back. And I had to do it quick, and it worked. But what produced that all of a sudden? And we've been experiencing these types of things, Andrea, and everybody out there listening, the more, because we're in our fourth year now. This is not something that came and went. We didn't get weaker as the months and the years went by. We've gotten stronger. Our guests have gotten, it's the wow factor. It's the whoa factor. Paradise even would text me when certain guests are on. He's like, whoa, man, y'all are doing this. And, oh, man, you just had 2 in a row. My favorites, this and that, getting commentary when they see these flyers, because we stay in personal contact with everybody, because we want people to know that we're serious about what we're doing. This is not for any of us to get personal shine. It's about really affecting the change in the condition of our people. So on that note, I wanted to ask you, if and I'm sure you are, but for the record, are you familiar with this statement by the great Nina Simone, where she said in an interview that she believed that the duty of an artist, or the responsibility of an artist, was to reflect the times in which they find themselves? Are you familiar with that statement? Yes. Yeah, and it's Nina Simone. I'll be honest with you, I didn't watch the movie at all, because I just couldn't do it. But Nina Simone was that woman was a mind
You know what I'm saying? She was one, to me, she's a perfect representation of the double-sided mind of an artist. Remember I said how, like, we have that analytical side, many of us, but we also have the creative side. And she honestly was really both. I think that talking about women in the industry, she was so big about freedom and liberty and so unapologetic about where she stood, you know, on issues during a time when her career could have been shattered. And I think in a way, her career has been posthumous because I think that she really didn't get as much glory as she should have while she was living. But yeah, that quote says a lot. And it's kind of sad almost to think that something that she said, when she said it, like in the 70s, it's still so poignant right now in 2019, you know? So.
Yeah, and the reason I asked about if you're familiar, because I really want to get your thoughts on when you hear cultural revolution, when you hear the term cultural revolution. Now, of course, China, and we can Google and read and study on the great cultural revolution of China under the great chairman Mao Zedong. But when you look at the black condition in America, and then, of course, you look at black people globally, but we got to look here where we are first, because it's black people in America that are most in need of resurrection, redemption. When you talk about cultural revolution, what does that mean to you? And what does it look like?
Well, wow, that's one heck of a question. So, cultural revolution. Okay, you use China as an example. So their cultural revolution really took place in 10 years. So we're talking about it ended. I want to say when I was around 4. It was around 1976, but it started around 1966. So that was really the major period when they had this, what I call an epiphany of just how large a number they were and how much cultural influence that they had. And the reason why I mentioned that number about how it was basically a decade of an epiphany, it took us 400 years to forget, okay? I heard a white man and say this one time. He said, don't get mad. He said, because we're the new king. He said, don't get mad. He said, because you all, black people, ran the entire world since the dawn of time. He said, it's just our turn. And he said, so the biggest thing that is wrong, and this is a white guy talking, he said, the biggest thing, the biggest problem, he said, is that you're so busy allowing us to tell you to glorify being the first black person to be allowed to work here, the first black person to do this in this country, to do that in this country. He said, when you all forget that you all started it all. And so the cultural revolution for black people is different than any other revolution that has ever happened before, because there was a group of people that literally did everything in their power on a global level to erase us from history itself, because they knew that if there are pieces of the Bible, the Apocrypha, that was taken out, because if it was left in, it would give too much information about who we were. And you can't justify turning the same people that you negotiated transcontinental trade with. They didn't know anything. These people in Europe didn't know anything about nautical anything. They didn't know anything about going over the seas. They didn't know anything about trade. They didn't know anything about commerce, trade, none of that. So Socrates learned from Africa. They used to the Greeks sent their people into Africa to learn about mathematics and science and alchemy and all these different things, the Tower of Giza, a pyramid, is the same exact scientific stuff that Tesla used and created. And they made him look like he was crazy because he wanted to give it away for free. And they wanted to use carbon-based energy, which is why we have all these different dumb plants now for electricity. But I digress. My point is that the Cultural Revolution for black people, not only in this country, but worldwide, is really simple. Remember who you are. Our generations right now in 2019, my own children included, and you know, you already know I come from a long line of royalty and civil rights activists.
Yeah, now get into that. Share a little bit of that, would you? Because let me just say this: what we're hearing from our sister is not just because she has high levels of education in you know, and went through this program and went to this college and studied this. That's not all. There's a genetic reality here where struggle and revolution and soldier and stand up and fight and all of that is in her genetic makeup. And if you can just share a little bit of that as we wind down and continue.
You know, and I will, and I will say this for everybody that's listening. I never talk about this. And, you know, it was these two awesome brothers on this show that made me realize that now's the time. And, you know, in a way I've kind of hid behind the industry and helping everybody else do what they had to do. Because sometimes when you have a calling to do something great, it's also very scary. So even talking about this is it puts me on the map in a way that I had to be prepared for. It's probably why I had to wait until I was 46 years old to do it. So my background comes from a lot of different places. On my father's side, my father was the first medical surgeon in California to publicly support the Black Panther Party. His mother and father were never slaves. They were and I say that because he was born in 1930. Yeah, my dad was like mad old. His parents and his parents before that, they were never slaves. His mother was a tribal Native American. Now, this is where it gets interesting. She was black. Now, I, for years, thought that her sister, who was 95 when I talked to her, and this is back when I was 29 years old, I thought she was crazy because she used to tell me all the time that Native Americans, many of the tribes, were African or African descent or whatever, that we used to travel and that a lot of these Native Americans were just black people that had settled here from the very beginning. I was like, yeah, whatever. But at the end of the day, she was telling the truth. And it took me years later and research to realize just how truthful she was telling me. So I learned all these stories years before the internet and everything else like that confirmed it. And I feel bad now because I really didn't believe her. His father was a settler in this country. You know what I'm saying? So he came from another country, you know, and his people that were already here when they came over. And they had to move from Alabama to Georgia because of, you know, they had to protect their land and they had to shoot somebody, a white guy. And so back in the day, you know, if you went over state lines, people left you alone. So that's that. On my mother's side, I come from royalty. The Massaquoi family, Mama Lou Massaquoi was the first African diplomat in the world. His, I want to say grandson, Hans Massaquoi, is my uncle. He was the managing editor of Ebony magazine during the Civil Rights Movement. Matter of fact, that's how my mother met my father, because she was an Ebony bachelorette in 1970, and my dad saw her picture in the Ebony magazine and wrote in to the magazine, and somehow that letter ended up in Mom's hand, and they decided to meet, and the rest is history. And a couple years later, here I am.
Wow.
But in addition to all of that, and my mom is the designer of the EFT system, Electronic Funds Transfer System, for Merrill Lynch International. So the reason why you had direct deposit, the reason why wires are as easy as they are from one country and one bank to another is because of my mother heading a team of people at Merrill Lynch to make it so, a black woman. And she was one of the first programmers ever at IBM. And the reason this, Hidden Figures movie that came out, she cried because she didn't realize that there were women in the South going through the same thing that she was going through up in New York. And before all of that, the Poole family is a part of my family too. And, part of this by marriage.
Poole family, you said?
Yeah. Yes, the Poole family, Poole, from Sandersville, Georgia. My great third great grandfather was Robert Hooks, who was the General Assemblyman of Washington County. He also was, ironically, a Confederate colonel and an attorney from New York, and he was a spy, and for the Union. And he fell in love with a black woman. They had one black child. And he gave that child everything, all of the land, all the assets, everything. And my family and that land that we still own some of it to this day is the first recorded deed in the United States for African Americans. So, and the Poole family, the particular Poole person that y'all know and love would be the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So that's right. I come from a long line of people that stand up and fight and educate themselves on the reality of who we are, what we are, and what our purpose is. So the cultural revolution for our people is not just about the future. It's just about knowing who you are. Because once you understand where you came from, and then you understand what you're capable of doing, if you realize how powerful you are, then this gang over here, known as the Crips, that originally dealt with community activism, and this group over here, the Bloods, if y'all would realize how powerful you are and come together, your neighborhoods would change. And instead of you trying to protect the corners of buildings that you do not own, you'll actually go ahead and start owning the buildings so that way you can change your neighborhood. Why do you think they're legalizing marijuana? Because it was a certain type of substance and product that they couldn't stop the African American community from utilizing for their own good. Now, yes, there was a lot of bad in there too. I'm not stupid. I'm not sitting here saying it wasn't. We all know that drugs and crime is wrong. But in the same breath, though, it was a market that a lot of our young people were able to, unfortunately, utilize and had to utilize in order to have a come up in some kind of way. That's why that from a jurisdictional standpoint, there are actually more offenses for things like weed than there is for cocaine, because they knew that we couldn't get down with that because we couldn't afford it. So when they realized that they couldn't stop that economic empowerment because we figured out ways around that system, they legalized it. And then they gave all of the licenses and the control to people other than us. You think that was an accident? So, I mean, and I'm going to be real with you. Even though, yes, I understand all this, I have to say this, and I have to be honest. I do have a sensation of not believing that everyone in certain races are evil. I can't get with that, and I apologize to y'all for that, but I can't because I've met too many good people. But at the same time, though, I also know that, like I think Muhammad Ali said it best. He said, if you have, 1 million snakes and 2,000 of them, you can rub them and they're going to love you. Right. He said, do you still not protect yourself when you know that the very nature of the rest of the million snakes coming at you, they're going to bite you? So what I'm saying is, and to be politically correct, but at the same time 100, is that you take everybody at face value and you judge people by their character. But we as a people have to get to the point where we understand that there's a difference between forgiveness, open-heartedness, and straight-up logic. And we have to get to a point where it's not about how good or how bad another person or another race is. It really isn't about that at all. It's about what are you going to actually do to empower your family. Can I say one more point and then give it back?
Absolutely.
To give an example of what I'm talking about, to understand that while we are harping and we're talking specifically about African Americans, about black people across the world, I want you all to look at something from a 4-generation situation here. Now, I'm going to use my family as an example. Now, I told you that my family had land, and they were the first recorded deed in this country, all right, of black people owning property. Now, you can look that up. We're in books. So that's 4 generations, okay? My great-great-grandmother, Rachel Hooks, was one of the kids that got some of the land. Her daughter was my great-grandmother, and there was Nana, and then my mama, and now there's me. So I'm 5 generations from when that branch of kids took their share of Robert Hooks' land, all right? 5 generations. So for all intents and purposes, if we had this land for 5 generations, I should be stinking rich right now, being 100, just from that alone. I'm also 5 generations from a royal family. I'm a princess in another country, even though it's a democratic country now, Liberia. But at the end of the day, I still own land and property over there right now. So if things were handled a certain way, 5 generations later, I should be rich from that too, but I'm not. Now let's talk about why. In this country, in the United States, 5 generations ago, people that were not black were allowed to do certain things. They got a house, okay, because they were allowed to get a loan. From that loan and that house, they were able to work, do their thing, pay their mortgage. Simultaneously, they worked on their credit, and they also made sure that they had a will and life insurance. When they died, now the life insurance policy, we're going to say it's a cheap one. We'll say it's only about $20,000. They have $20,000 that they were able to leave to the next generation. They left a will, which is a legal document that any court will honor, even if it goes against the basic rules of certain probate and situations that are in that particular state. The will always supersede that. So the will then superseded any laws and gave it to their children or whoever it is that they wanted. So now that kid's got $20,000. He's got everything deeded over to him where he does not have to go through probate court, really, because they usually try to do it and give it over even before they die. But if they didn't, and they did it after they've got the will, they handled the business, they pay a few taxes, maybe even use the life insurance money to satisfy that, so they straight. And they have the original house, which is an asset. 9 times out of 10, it was paid off. But even if it wasn't, because they had good credit, they could take over the loan because it's easier to get a loan turned over to you, and the qualifications are a little different than getting a loan the first time around where the asset wasn't already in your family. So by the 2nd generation now, they've got cash, they've got the asset, and they also have good credit because they were taught how to do it. That generation now pays off that house. The house asset is now worth probably double what it was worth before. So now they have liquid asset value, cash, that instead of them getting a loan from money that they have to borrow, they now are just taking equity out of the assets that they own. They do a will the same way. They teach their kids about credit the same way. That $20,000 policy, because it's now grandfathered, they can actually give their child somewhere around $50,000 to $75,000. You do that 4 or 5 generations deep, you're going to have economic wealth and empowerment for your children. The problem that we have as people, as African Americans, is that we do not teach our children how to work the system. We want to keep waiting for the system and the people that created that system that was not for us to just all of a sudden hand us something. No. It's the same system that they had 200 years ago. It's the same system they had 5 generations ago. Learn the system and realize for once that it ain't all about you. Because once you get to a point where you realize that everything that you're working for, everything that you're striving for is not about you, you can't take it with you, and your real purpose and responsibility is to the generations that haven't even been born yet. When you understand that, which goes back to the foundation of who you were before you even came to this country, then and only then will economic empowerment and cultural empowerment take place amongst our people. That's all I got to say on that.
Now y'all see why I said she's going to be and is, in fact, a wonderful part of the Cultural Revolution, a wonderful addition to the Rapstation family. That's why Chuck, as a visionary, saw her greatness and her power and put her in this position where she could exercise that power potential and put to work what she has envisioned for Rapstation, and really through Rapstation for countless numbers of artists and individuals who are all about change, who are all about the Cultural Revolution. With that said, we want to thank our sister Andrea Le Musique Temmeli for being with us tonight. We want to thank our sister Half Pint for all that she does in contributing to the Hip Hop for Justice platform and pushing it forward. And of course, we couldn't have this platform were it not for my big brother S1W James Baum of the legendary Public Enemy. I want to shout him out and thank him for everything that he does to keep this platform moving forward. Sister, thank you so much for being with us. We're going to have to bring you back again and have another conversation as we progress and move forward. And we're looking forward to this union with Rapstation and Hip Hop for Justice. And we're going to keep everybody fully updated and plugged in as we move forward. So once again, Sister Andrea, thank you so much for being with us. And thank everybody for tuning in and listening to us live. Until next week, peace and love.